This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review, and what I'm looking at today is 2015's Exeter, directed by Marcus Nispel. And if you look at the IMDb page for Marcus Nispel, you'll notice something interesting, namely that he's directed 94 things. I use things for a reason, which I'll get into right now. While the bulk of the rest of the things that he directed are music videos or video documentaries of particular artists. And he's had quite a career. That being said, there's probably a reason why he's only done, up to this point at any rate, 4 features. And that's likely because his feature films have not been well received. For instance, his remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or his remake of Conan the Barbarian, which is originally done by John Milius, by the way, and is brilliant, and didn't need a remake in the first place. In any case, I didn't know what to expect from Exeter going in. And story-wise, which was also written by Nispel, it's nothing you haven't seen before, and in fact, Exeter plays pretty much like Night of the Demons from the mid-1980s, which is to say, it revolves around a group of young people, and they happen to be attending a party where they shouldn't, which is probably the plot of virtually every other horror movie. And bad things happen. In this case, it's being held in this former institution that was called Exeter. And it was a place for young people, and the young people were treated incredibly badly. And this priest, one of the only people who was present when Exeter was active, is refurbishing the building into something else after it was damaged by fire. Now, that the priest is being played by Stephen Lang should tell you right off the bat that something isn't right. And if you watch the movie, currently available on Tubi by the way, you'll see what I mean. In any case, these young people decide to have a party in this institution. Well, former institution I should say. And one of them becomes possessed. You don't know how this is happening, though what we learn is that a former resident was seemingly possessed and all sorts of bad things happened around this person. They believe he's the reason why. I believe his name was Devin. Yes, his name was Devin. And they believe that because of Devin, they're being plagued now. As I said, not at all a new idea, though Nispel tries to make it a little more twisty than it perhaps should have been, because it doesn't quite work. I don't think it does at any rate. It's still enjoyable, and in fact, I'll be honest, Exeter is not a great movie, but that being said, a lot of movies aren't great movies. It's hard to come by great movies. In fact, what Exeter is enjoyable. It's a lot of fun, it's shockingly gory at points, and it's pretty creepy. What impressed me, beyond the seemingly practical visual effects, it's that the movie actually seems to have been filmed in an abandoned building. Now, you might think that's a relatively minor thing, but it's not. What you have to keep in mind is that the setting a movie takes place in is crucial to the story. Sometimes the setting, be it a city, a building, whatever, actually becomes a character in the movie itself, if it's done well. And that happens to be the case with Exeter. And that's why it so impresses me. This looks like an abandoned building. This does not feel to me like a building that was set dressed to be an abandoned building. Now keep in mind, that's not to say that there wasn't set dressing going on. Obviously there would be. But the thing is, I feel like they started with an abandoned building, and it helps give this movie an atmosphere, a creepiness that it wouldn't otherwise have. So I'm so for it. I think it's great. Though I mentioned earlier that the movie is written by Marcus Nispel as well. And that's the problem. His writing is not great. It's not terrible, particularly some of the dialogue. It just snaps. It's really good. But overall, in terms of the themes and the plotting of the movie, it's not great. A lot of things don't make sense. And one of the weirdest scenes for me it was a funny scene, but weird, revolved around an ADR voice. And this leads itself to that oddness in his directorial style, at least by my reckoning. It didn't need to be there at all. And in case some of you out there don't know what I mean by ADR, it's when you have a voiceover for someone, but the person on camera, at the moment it is filmed, they're not actually talking. So sometimes when you watch a movie and you don't see a person's full face, let's say they're turned away or something, that can be ADR'd, which is to say a recording, they make a recording of that person speaking, but it's not part of that main track. It's added after the fact. And in the case of Exeter, there's a point where this voice is just ADR'd in, and it's so unnecessary. It's funny, but it's also unnecessary, and it didn't need to be there. To remove that ADR track would have, I think, tightened up the scene a little bit. Now keep in mind, it's only one scene. But there are numerous scenes throughout this movie that are just oddly placed and strange. And I don't quite know what the thinking was behind them, because I think of Exeter very much in the vein of a dark comedy. It's definitely a horror movie, and there's certainly plenty of horror movie elements, but it's funny. I should say, I think it's funny. But the thing of it is, I'm not sure that was the intention of Marcus Nispel. But in any case, that humor was something that I talk about often, namely incidental humor. Which is to say, you have people just interacting with each other, and someone makes an exclamation or says something that's so out of whack that it's really funny, but it also feels natural. In other words, it's not someone saying something stupid just to say something stupid or strange or bizarre. It's just someone reacting in a moment, or at least it feels like someone is reacting in a moment, and it's really funny. And speaking of that ADR scene, there's another scene where there are 7 people, by the way. There are 7 of these. There are 7 friends who are all caught up in this. And one of them is believed to be possessed, so he's tied up as best they can. And I want to say 4 or 5 of them enter the room where the possessed person is tied up. And one of them has this look on his face like he's going to kick somebody's ass. The problem with that is that under the circumstances, that is highly unlikely to be the case. That's a director fuck-up, to be totally honest. That he entered that room with such a brave face, under the circumstances, made no sense at all. So it was really weird. And there are other scenes like this. Scenes I think a better director would have caught and responded to. But Marcus Nispel, for whatever reason, didn't. And it doesn't ruin the movie by any stretch. Though as I said, it makes it funny. And that's probably, oddly enough, why I like Exeter so much. Namely, it's a darkly comedic horror movie. And it is, for the most part, a well-done, darkly comedic horror movie. Now, would I have enjoyed it more if it weren't so intentionally/unintentionally funny? I don't know, to be totally honest. I think it would have perhaps been scarier, though it was plenty atmospheric and creepy as it is. Though I think it would have been even more so if it weren't intentionally or unintentionally humorous. But that being said, Exeter is a really good watch. And funny thing is, as many problems as the movie has, it is probably the most interesting film I have yet to see from Marcus Nispel. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.